Happy New Year! I'm Jeff Schwartz. This is our Schwartz Performance January 2024 shop update video. Let's see what we got going on. This Hellcat powered Monte Carlo is back from the upholstery shop. I absolutely love how this interior came out. We're still working on some electrical things, and then this thing should be ready to be dyno tuned. So what we've got here is kind of a sad story, but it's a Ford, and it's got a fantastic paint job on it and a really neat twin turbocharged engine. But I wanted to show you a couple things underneath it. It's covered to kind of protect the identity, but I feel I need to share some things underneath the car to show you why it's important to pick a professional shop to do your build. Just because someone can paint a car doesn't mean they're capable of building it. And by building, I mean fabrication, wiring, engineering of the suspension, things like that. Also, just because a shop is a chassis builder that does drag race stuff does not mean that they know how to build suspension that works properly on the street or in a pro touring application, which is handling and so forth. So let me show you some basic things under the car that are horribly wrong with this. And the sad thing is stories like this occur every day, and people put lots of money into the project that they love, and then they end up with inferior results. So we're going to make this thing fabulous, and you'll see it over the next few months in the shop update video. But let's check out underneath and I'll show you a few things gone wrong. So what we've got here is a drag race style rear suspension. It's a parallel 4-link with a panhard bar. So right off the bat, the panhard bar position, this has a really high roll center and shouldn't be mounted this high, number one. Number two, the basic thing is this panhard bar is contacting the rear end right here. So there's literally an inch of space there. This is at full droop. When the car is on the ground, that's touching. It's already been bent from transporting the car. This car has never been driven. The date code on the tires are from 20 plus years ago. So it's been under construction literally for 20 years. And you cannot drive this car because this is resting right on the rear end. There's nothing you can do here with adjustments to correct this. This has to be completely cut off and re-engineered. In this case, we're going to basically put a whole new chassis under here that has none of these issues because it would be too costly to try to repair all the things that are wrong with this thing. In addition to that, you can see up here the upper panhard bar mount has put a large dent in the floor. And again, this car has never been driven. It's just been transported in a trailer. So just bouncing slightly in the trailer, it's actually contacted the floor here, and the panhard bar actually rests on there just at ride height. There's all kinds of external bracing here that's not really needed in this application. Then this forward 4-link mount is literally a couple inches off the ground, and it's ahead of the wheel center line. So any type of speed bump, this car is going to get hung up right here. Let's take a look a little further underneath the car. This chassis is actually in pretty nice shape. It's relatively rust-free. It doesn't look like there's a little bit of pitting here, but it doesn't look like there was a lot of rust on this chassis. But the amount of work that has been put into this chassis to install the rear suspension in the front that we will look at shortly is just a huge amount of labor and time. And it would have been much better off to just put a different chassis under here. However, I guess 20 years ago, there wasn't chassis available for a car like this. But here I'm going to point out the seat mounting bolts. Most people, when they build a car, they put aftermarket seats in it, and that's fine. However, generally what we try to do, if it has a stock floor pan, we will try to make some type of adapter that actually makes the seat bolts or the seats bolt into the factory location, because the factory location has been reinforced, so if you get into a collision, the seat doesn't rip out of the floor. So what we got here is all 4 bolts for both front seats are these little tiny, I don't know if they're 1/4 or 5/16, I guess they're 5/16 bolts that are obviously way too long. Now, maybe they intended to cut these off and so forth, but you know, they literally left these things, they're sticking out about 2.5 inches, and they just have a little washer under a couple of them. They have a fender washer here and here. This one doesn't have one, but this is just drilled through the floor pan, and these are just normal hardware store bolts, so they're not any, they're probably like a grade 3 or something. They're not even like a grade 5 or a grade 8. So in any type of collision, this seat is literally going to rip out of the floor. The other thing is every single body mount on here has a stud, and this is just a 3/8 stud, which again is kind of small, but no one ever put the nut on. So 20 years under construction, this thing is not bolted to the body. How do you set door gaps and things like that without having it tightened down to the chassis? It's very important that the chassis be completely mounted to the body when you start doing body work and things like that. So anyway, every single body mount, there is no nut holding it on. So this body is just literally setting on the car. Let's go take a look at the front suspension now. And what we've got here is a manual rack and pinion that's been fitted to this. And when you're updating an old car, it's nice to have a rack and pinion steering installed. However, this is a manual rack. This is a big, giant, heavy car with a cast iron engine in it that's very heavy. And this has no provision for any power steering of any sort. So the engine, you know, has a serpentine drive, and there's no power steering pump on it. And then obviously, you know, the manual rack. So the other thing is this rack is literally 1 inch in diameter, and the tie rods are like 3/8 of an inch here. So this is a very light duty drag race unit that would have been on, you know, maybe some type of rail dragster or an altered, a really lightweight car. This is totally inferior for a heavy car like this. And you can see right here, this 3/8 tie rod has been put into a larger diameter tube that's threaded on this end, and that was welded to the rack here. And then they altered the factory spindle and put a little tiny 3/8 bolt through here and welded a tube to that for the steering arm. And this little 3/8 bolt, if you hit like a bump in the road where there's some side forces on this thing while you're cornering, this thing's going to bend or break right off. I mean, this is absolutely only for a very lightweight car going in a straight line down a 1/4 mile. I mean, this is just a disaster waiting to happen here. Moving on further, you can see this control arm here. I believe they cut both upper and lower control arms to move the tires in so they could get tire clearance or something like that. That's the only thing I can think of. Why would they cut the control arms in half? Both the top upper control arm and lower control arm have been chopped and shortened. You can see this big step here where they don't match together. The spring pocket's been filled in with a nice little TIG weld here. I don't know why they didn't just cut the spring pocket out, but anyway, a lot of time and effort went into making this like this, and obviously this is just a disaster waiting to happen. Other things we found, this car has a beautiful billet serpentine drive setup on it with an air conditioning compressor. However, the real estate under the dash where you would normally mount the air conditioning evaporative unit is not available because the MSD box was mounted there along with the ECU for the EFI system. And that's a big no-no, having both of those things right next to one another. It's a disaster waiting to happen. The MSD box emits radio frequency, and it'll totally mess up the EFI system and possibly fry the ECU. So you cannot have that. So we need to put an air conditioning system in it. All that stuff will need to be relocated somewhere where they're far away from each other, and you know, hopefully we can find a piece of real estate for that. The other thing, it's got very large intercoolers in the front and a big radiator, because this is a twin turbocharged engine. However, there is no room at all to put the AC condenser. So that's another thing we're going to have to address. It's very difficult when a car is completely fabricated to try to add in these pieces of the puzzle that were never put there in the first place. So I don't know why you would build a car with air conditioning in mind, but then fail to put the components on that are required to make the air conditioning work. Anyway, that's a sad story for today. Let's get on to some other good news. This is the 73 Le Mans we saw last month, and the Mercedes seats are now in there and functioning. We've got just a couple little things to do, and then it's going back to the upholstery shop to have the carpet installed and the interior wrapped up. Another tip, when you're building a car, it's way more cost effective to buy an aftermarket seat, even as high end as, say, a Recaro seat, than it is to put factory seats from another car in it. The factory seats from modern cars are often run through the body control module, and they have CAN bus type electrical, and all of that stuff has to be converted to manual analog type operation. So there's a boatload of labor and time involved in making modern seats work in an old car. So once again, it's probably more cost effective to just buy an aftermarket seat than to try to fit, you know, Hellcat seats in a old Charger, or Mercedes seats in a Pontiac, or BMW seats, etc. So do yourself a favor. Those junkyard seats look like a deal, but in the end, they're not so much. You may have seen this El Camino before. This is Josh Howe's El Camino. He's from Iowa, and it's been on the autocross circuit for about 10 years now. So we brought it in here to do a little dialing in and see how things were going. So there's a few little maintenance items we had to do, and a couple of you know, things that we've learned over the years that we updated. So everything's ready to rock and roll now. And when you are using your car for competition and so forth, it is very important that you do maintenance on it occasionally, and make sure everything's greased and everything's tight and things like that. So anyway, this is about ready to go back to them, and I look forward to seeing this on the track some more in 2024. As you can see, this is the 54 Chevy pickup. This has a 502 Ramjet in it, and we finally got the transmission, a 4L80 that our friend John at Advantage Trans here in Woodstock built for us. So this is ready to go into the truck, and then we can continue on with the build. We've also fitted the giant 355/30/19 Michelins on the back. This is going to be a really fun truck with the trans and so forth. Incidentally, this gentleman came in with his wife from Canada to take a look at the truck recently, and can't wait to get this in his hands and he can start burning rubber around the Winnipeg area in Canada. Since we don't have the gas tank yet, and we've been waiting for quite a long time, I might add, we had to put a cardboard mock-up tank in here so we can finish fabricating the exhaust. Our guy Paul is working on the exhaust on this one. Check out the TIG welds on this. This is that Dodge Monaco wagon with the Hellcat engine and the gigantic automatic transmission in there. We've got the powder-coated chassis installed, and we're working on the header solution. The left side fit perfectly, the right side not so much, so we got to work that out and then fab the exhaust system. We've still got a little more metal repair to do on this Le Mans Pontiac here. The taillight area needs a little bit work, and then we'll be on to the next step. This is that Chevelle with the giant 632 Chevy big block in it, and we have finished fabricating the headers, and we're now proceeding with fabricating the exhaust system. This is that 66 Chevy 2 Nova with the 1,000 horsepower turbocharged Wagner LS engine. We've been working on fitting air conditioning components and other things to make it run and drive down the road. So it's in the final assembly stage, as you can see, and a lot of tedious work getting all those components installed and working. As you can see, this is the 54 Studebaker project. All of the projects here at Schwartz Performance I love. However, this one is especially fond because I have back in that corner of the building a 53 Studebaker that belongs to me. It's the same body style as this. Of course, my car is just a rolling hulk from that's been sitting for decades and doesn't look anything like this. But I would love to do that car in a similar look. So if you could comment in the comments section, if we built another car like this, wide body 53 Studebaker, what do you think we should put in it for a power plant? Should we do an LT4 like this one, supercharged LT4, or should we do a Hellcat engine? Let us know in the comments. Anyway, final assembly is continuing on this, and again, a lot of tedious work making everything fit and work properly, but it's turning out fabulous. As soon as I finish assembling my 1950 Studebaker that I'm working on at my personal workshop, this 72 C10 will be getting some attention and love. I still have to mount the ECU and some of the components under the dash, and then it'll be body and paint time. One thing that we found on this truck, and if you're doing trucks, there's a double layer between the cab, roof, and the interior. So there's two layers of metal in there. There's also like a piece of insulation or sound deadening in between there. And apparently this had held some moisture. We had this truck dipped many years ago, and it started corroding from inside that cavity to the roof, and we had bubbles in the roof. So we ended up just putting a new roof on this thing. And so when you're doing trucks, make sure that you check that roof thoroughly to make sure there's not any hidden sins. It would have been a shame to have the whole truck painted and then have the roof rot out from the inside, which is what was going to happen on this thing. So I'm actually grateful that we spotted those bubbles coming up through the epoxy primer. And this is the 1979 Corvette project. This is going to be our shop autocross car, replacing the Tempest, which I sold several years ago. As you can see, I've got a forge line wheel here. This is the wheels that we chose for this build. The thing I'd like to point out is this is getting our new G-Machine Corvette chassis, and we've engineered the chassis so the rear suspension has a little bit of a lip on the back wheel. When you build a hot rod, generally you like to see a deeper dish or a larger lip on the rear wheel. It gives it kind of a better aggressive look. And a lot of the Corvette chassis that are on the market, they require you to run a wheel that's basically flush, almost like a modern car. And to me, that doesn't look good on older cars. So we've engineered our chassis so that we can run wheels that have a nice lip like you see on this one, and still have plenty of brake caliper clearance for those 14-inch brakes that we're putting on this one. We've been playing around with different tire combinations. It looks like we're either going to go with a 305 or a 315 in the rear on an 11-inch rim, and in the front we're going to do a 10-inch rim and probably a 285 tire in the front. So large tire and wheel fitment without flaring the fenders is what we're going to have here. Obviously, if you flare the fenders, then you can run something huge like a 355 like we showed you on that truck over there a little while ago. But anyway, this is the forge line wheels we're putting on here. I've also fitted the Indy Pace Car spoiler to this. 79 Corvettes had Pace Car spoilers as an option. They were installed on all the Pace Cars for 1978, the Pace Car replicas. They were basically installed to increase stability on the track when they used the car as the Pace Car. So we've put them on this because they were an option, and they'll be functional. And I can't wait to get this thing out on the autocross course and beat it around a little bit. What's all this stuff doing here? You'll have to watch next month's video to find out. That's all we have for this month. Stay tuned for the February shop update video. Take care.